How's it going, guys? This is Jeremy. This is my big video that I told you guys about before. I've decided to start doing actual audiobooks on my channel. I decided that for my first audiobook, I wanted to do the story Blind Date, which was R.L. Stine's first teen thriller book. So in my opinion, this was kind of like a crucial turning point for R.L. Stine. Everything prior to this had always been like joke books, funny books, adventure books. Now he finally writes his first teen thriller. You know, there was a few more books that followed after this, which ultimately led up to the Fear Street series. So I thought for my first audiobook, Blind Date would be the perfect story to read. This video is going to be cut up into 5 parts. There's 20 chapters in the story, so I've done 4 chapters for each video. I'll continue to work on each video little bits at a time, and as I get them completed, I will upload them. So this video will be the first 4 chapters of the book. I hope you guys enjoy this. So one last time, this is Blind Date, R.L. Stine's first teen thriller book from 1986. Blind Date, Chapter 1. At first, when Carrie heard the sound of the bone breaking, he thought it was his. He closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and waited for the pain. He took a deep breath and buried his face in the wet grass. Over the pounding in his ears, he could hear the sing-song chant of the cheerleaders practicing at the other end of the stadium. "Give me a P, give me an A, give me an N, give me a break," Carrie thought. Then he realized the pain would not be his. Someone else was screaming in agony. Someone underneath Carrie was screaming in agony. Strong hands grabbed him by the shoulder pads and pulled him to his feet. Then someone gave him a hard shove from behind. That was a cheap shot, Carrie. He was shoved again. He spun away, confused, and stumbled to the ground beside the screaming player. The player's eyes were shut tight, and his mouth was twisted into a wide O of pain. He was lying on his back, one knee up, one leg jutting out at an angle that legs normally don't jut out to. This isn't happening, Carrie told himself, slapping both hands hard against the sides of his helmet. I didn't just break Sal Murdoch's leg. I couldn't. I refused to believe this. Carrie climbed to his feet, and someone shoved him again. "Get back, Turkey. Haven't you done enough?" Number 88, Wilson, swung a fist at Carrie. The punch missed, but the surprise of it sent Carrie sprawling backward, and he fell over someone's outstretched cleat. Sal was already down, Wilson screamed, standing over him. "You didn't need to jump on him." Break it up, Coach Stevens yelled, stepping between Carrie and Wilson. "It was an accident," Carrie said. "I couldn't stop in time." Wilson kicked the ground hard, sending the dirt flying onto Carrie's uniform. "Wilson, I said knock it off," Coach screamed, holding Wilson back, his small red hands pushing against the fullback shoulder pads. Wilson ignored the little coach. "You were number 2, he screamed at Carrie. "This was your way to be number 1? He turned away in disgust. "That's not true," Carrie called after him, his voice cracking. There was no way it could be true. How could Carrie compete with Sal Murdoch? Sal was All-State his sophomore year. He had been picked by Sports Illustrated as the best high school quarterback in the country. He had already led the Panthers to an undefeated season and a state championship. Everyone expected him to do it again this year. Carrie was an okay player for a small guy, but he wasn't really into football the way his teammates were. It was just a game after all. He probably wouldn't have even tried out if his father hadn't insisted, and if Donald hadn't been one of the school's biggest stars. Now, thanks to Carrie, Sal was laying on the ground with his leg in too many pieces, surrounded by cursing, angry teammates, shaking their heads, slamming their helmets to the ground. And everyone believed that Carrie had deliberately done it to him to be the number 1 quarterback. Carrie felt a hard tap on his left shoulder pad. He ducked, thinking he was about to be attacked again, but it was his good friend Josh Goodwin, the backup punter. "Looks like this may not exactly be your day," Josh said. "It was an accident," Carrie said. "Why don't they believe me?" "You have a dishonest face," Josh told him. Josh grinned, his little black eyes lighting up above his big, bulby nose. He looked just like the toucan on the Fruit Loops box. "Why'd you have to fall on Sal?" Josh asked. "Why couldn't you fall on someone else? A cheerleader, maybe? How about Linda Miles over there? I wouldn't mind falling on her." Carrie watched Coach Stevens running to the gym to call for an ambulance. "This is serious, Josh. What am I going to do?" Josh shrugged. "I don't know. Take up tiddlywinks?" "I'd probably fall on my opponent's thumb," Carrie said glumly. He shook his head and started toward the crowd of players around Sal. But 2 players, O'Brien and Malik, guys he'd always been pretty friendly with, blocked his way. Just go away, Hart, O'Brien said menacingly. It was an accident, Carey insisted. You were your parents' accident, Malik yelled. Take a walk, Hart, O'Brien said, giving him a hard shove on the chest pad. You're not wanted here. You're history, Malik said. You're dead meat. The next few minutes were a blur, a nightmare of angry voices, shoving and threatening words. Why wouldn't anyone listen to him? What happened? What happened to Sal? It was Sharon Spinner, Sal's girlfriend, running ahead of the other cheerleaders. Carey Hart broke Sal's leg, O'Brien told her. Sharon screamed. She stopped right in front of Carey. Her face seemed to be on fire, her normally perfect blonde hair flaring up like flames. How could you? How could you? She screamed into Carey's face. I didn't, Carey started, but he could see from her wild, frantic eyes that she wouldn't listen to him. What about his football scholarship? Sharon yelled. What about his career? How's he going to go to college now? How could you? She didn't wait for any reply from Carey. She turned and started toward Sal, but she tripped over the edge of the tarp they had covered Sal with to keep him warm and fell onto Sal's chest. Oh my God, she screamed. He's dead. He's dead. Carey gasped for air. Everything went white. No, he isn't, one of the players said. Cool it, Sharon. He's just passed out, probably from shock. Carey took a deep breath. Colors began to come back. You've ruined his life. Ruined it. Carey realized that Sharon was screaming at him again. All he ever cared about was football. Now he'll never get to play anymore. The ambulance is on its way, Coach Stevens called, running across the field from the gym, the whistle around his neck swinging from side to side, his pouch bouncing up and down beneath his gray sweatshirt as he ran. Okay, man, go get dressed. This scrimmage is over. This season is over, a player muttered. Who said that? Coach yelled, still trying to catch his breath from his run. A flash of anger crossed his face, but he quickly stifled it. Never mind, he said, shaking his head. Just go get dressed. And Hart, wait in my office, okay? He shot Carey a disgusted look. Oh boy, Carey said to Josh. What do you think he's going to do? Josh shrugged. He's probably not going to name you team captain. Carey's teammates began to jog slowly toward the locker room. Some of them pointed at him menacingly as they passed. You're dead meat, Hart, someone repeated. Most of them wouldn't look at him. Carey started toward Coach's office at the side of the gym. The sun was lowering behind the hills, casting a wide shadow across the football field. Carey shivered in the cold air. He realized he was soaking wet from sweat. As he reached the door to Coach's office, he saw the white and yellow ambulance, its sirens wailing, pulling into the school parking lot. He shivered again and went inside. The small room had that odor to Coach's office, a combination of gym socks and rubbing alcohol. A silver football trophy had been converted into a table lamp set on the edge of the Coach's clustered desk, providing the only light. A football-shaped mirror streaked with dust hung on the wall beside the desk. Carey looked into the mirror and wiped some dirt off his cheek with his hand. He pushed back his wavy brown hair and tried to flatten it into place. Ever since a girl at the mall stopped him to ask if he was Ralph Macchio, the guy from The Karate Kid, Carey had taken more interest in his appearance. With his dark hair and clean dark features, he looked a lot like Ralph Macchio, but without the openness or confidence the actor conveyed. The back wall of the tiny office was covered with team photographs, one photo for each of the 20 years that Stevens had been the Panther coach. Carey walked up to the wall and stared at the teams at eye level, not really seeing anything, just a blur of gray faces. Suddenly, one face came into focus. I see you. I know you're there, Carey said aloud. He was staring at Donald's face. Donald, arms around the players at either side of him, grinning out at Carey. Donald, the champ. Donald, the star, wearing number 11. Carey looked down at his own jersey and frowned. Why had he also picked number 11? Why did he pick his brother's old number? Because he tried to do everything that Donald did? To be everything that Donald was? Why was he wearing a football jersey at all? Just because Donald wore one? He turned away from the photographs and took a seat in the folding chair in front of Coach's desk. He tried to force his mind to go blank. He concentrated on waiting. About 10 minutes later, the inner door opened, letting in a shaft of bright yellow light from the gym, startling Carey awake. Coach walked in and nodded to Carey without really looking at him. His face twitched nervously. His cheeks were bright pink. He began to pace back and forth in the tiny cubicle. "How's Sal?" Carey asked. Coach stopped pacing. "Not good," he said, his forehead wrinkling. "I don't like the fact that he isn't conscious. It's probably just shock, but I don't like it at all." "It really was an accident," Carey began. He started to explain everything, but Coach raised his pudgy hand. "Of course it was an accident," he said, finally looking at Carrie. "I'm not about to believe that one of my boys deliberately went out to injure another one of my boys. And I'm certainly not about to believe that about Donald's younger brother." Donald again. This time Carrie didn't mind. Let him talk about Donald all he wants, as long as he believes me, Carrie thought. Coach began pacing again, his face twitching. This wasn't easy for him. He wasn't used to choosing his words carefully. "Carrie," he said, "I know you've had a lot of tragedy to live with in the past year or so." Carrie was too startled to speak. No one ever talked about his tragedy. Not his dad, not his younger brother Sean, not Josh, or any of his other friends. So hearing Coach mention it to him gave him a real jolt, started his heart pounding. "That makes this even more difficult for me," Coach said, still pacing 3 steps one way, 3 steps back. "You'll have to leave the team. You can't play for the Panthers." "But it was an accident," Carrie protested. "That doesn't matter. The other players think it was deliberate. They won't play with you as quarterback. Most of them want to knock your head off. But if I stay on the team and—" Coach put his fist down on the edge of the desk and leaned forward, staring right into Carrie's eyes. "If you stay on the team, you'll only be a morale problem. I'm sorry, Carrie. That's it. It's over. Go clean out your locker." Carrie sat staring at the back wall, the smiling black and white faces of past teams looking back at him. He tried to avoid Donald's picture, but his eyes stopped on it anyway. He jumped to his feet, nodded to Coach, and walked to the door. "Now I have the unhappy job of calling Sal's parents," Coach said, as Carrie closed the door behind him. It didn't take long to clean out his locker. When he came out of the gym, he found Josh waiting for him in the parking lot. "I thought you could use a lift home," Josh said. "Do you have a car?" Carrie asked. "No," Josh said. "But it's the thought that counts, right?" They walked past the high school and up the tree-lined street. A sharp wind blew down from the hills, the first touch of autumn. The sun was a narrow orange ribbon outlining the low sloping hills. They walked through shades of gray towards Josh's house. It was 2 blocks from the school, a sprawling ranch house on a rolling hedge-lined lawn. Carrie lived up in the hills in a modest 2-family tract house, part of a development that was never finished. "I'll walk you to your house, then take the bus," Carrie said, adjusting the backpack on his shoulders. "So what happened?" Josh asked. "Did you get a lecture on why you shouldn't break the quarterback's leg?" "I got bounced," Carrie said flatly. They walked in silence for a few moments. "How do you feel about it?" Josh asked. "Dad isn't going to like it," Carrie replied. "I didn't ask about your dad. How's your cousin Gladys going to feel about it? What's your Uncle Max going to say?" Carrie didn't laugh. They walked a while in silence. They didn't see the car, a long 4-door Oldsmobile about 10 years old, until it pulled up beside them. "Hey, Hart." Carrie recognized O'Brien behind the wheel. There were a bunch of other kids in the car. "Hey, watch out, Hart." "Listen, O'Brien," Carrie yelled, angrier than he had thought. "It was just an accident. Coach says—" "I wouldn't walk around this neighborhood after dark," a voice in the back seat called out. "There could be another accident, you know what I mean?" Suddenly the back window was rolled down. Sharon Spinner stuck her head out. "You ruined his life. I'm going to pay you back." "Sharon, cool it," O'Brien called back to her. She seemed totally out of control. "I'm going to pay you back, Carrie." A soda can came flying out of the back window. It bounced against Carrie's backpack, spilling soda down his jacket. The car sped off. "Nice guys," Josh said. Carrie shrugged. "Catch you tomorrow," he said wearily. "Thanks for trying to cheer me up." He hurried toward the bus stop across the street. "I've got one last piece of advice," Josh called after him. "Don't say break a leg," Carrie said without looking back. "Ah, we've been friends too long," Josh said. "You know all my lines." He turned and headed up the smooth curving driveway that led to his house. The bus came a few minutes later, and Carrie rode in silence up into the low hills. At High Bluff Road, he stepped out into thick fog, cold and damp. Carrie shivered as he crossed the street to his house. The cold followed him right inside. The house was dark except for a small table lamp in the living room and the glare of the TV set. Sean was lying on the couch watching a Brady Bunch rerun. "At least I got one break," Carrie told himself. "Dad isn't home yet." He walked into the room and tossed his backpack onto an armchair. Sean didn't look up. "Dad working late?" Carrie asked. "For a change," Carrie said. His dad was seldom around these days. Criminals don't work banker's hours, he would tell them. But Carrie knew that after hours he mainly just hung around the station shooting the bull with the other cops. Did you eat? Carrie asked. Uh-huh. A conversation with Sean meant asking a lot of questions and hearing a lot of grunts and moans in reply. Carrie looked at his younger brother and shook his head. Sean was as blond as Carrie was dark. With his sharp jaw and spiky haircut, he imagined that he looked just like Stine. But he was short and had a lot of pimples, which ruined the effect. A bowl of potato chips and a beer? Is that any kind of dinner? Carrie asked, realizing that he was beginning to sound like a parent. Uh-huh. Sean seemed to spend more and more time staring at the TV. Who could blame him, Carrie thought. At least in the Brady Bunch, they kept all the lights on in the house, and the family is together, and they like each other. Carrie tried to remember the last time he'd heard from his mom. It had been at least a month. She had moved out soon after Donald left. She just couldn't take it, Carrie guessed. He still couldn't believe his parents were divorced. Sometimes he heard her voice in another room. Sometimes he smelled her perfume. Her weekly phone calls had become monthly calls. He and Sean were supposed to spend a month with her during the summer, but she had just started a new job, and the visit was postponed until Christmas. I know you understand, she said to Carrie over the phone, but he didn't really. I'm going upstairs, Carrie said. The laugh track on the Brady Bunch went wild. Uh-huh, Sean replied, with his mouth full of chips. Carrie climbed the creaky steps quickly in the dark, walked into his small room, ducking his head automatically beneath the low ceiling, and flung himself onto the bed with a loud sigh. He buried his head in his arm. He planned to lie there for a long while and feel sorry for himself. But the phone rang. He waited for Sean to pick it up. A second ring. Come on, Sean, get off the couch and pick it up. A third ring. Carrie groaned and pulled himself up. He walked over to the low counter that served as his desk and fumbled around in the dark for the phone. Hello? It was a girl's voice. Is this Carrie? He cleared his throat. Yes, it is. Hi, Carrie. It was the sexiest voice he had ever heard. I'm your blind date. Chapter 2. Is this a joke? It was the only thing Carrie could think of to say. I don't think so. Just a minute. Carrie reached for the light switch. Couldn't find it in the dark. I want to turn on a light. I'm in the dark here. Oh, don't turn on the light, Carrie. Let's talk in the dark. Her voice was kittenish, a soft purr. Every word seemed like an invitation. Okay. Way to go, Carrie. Sparkling wit. You're really impressing her. I understand you live up in the hills, she said. Yeah, how'd you know that? Oh, I know a lot about you, Carrie. Wow, this is unreal. What's your name? He asked. Guess. She laughed, a soft, teasing laugh. You sound like Nadia? Nadia, she exclaimed. That's right. I'm right? I guessed it? No, but I guess I do sound like a Nadia. She laughed again. Her laugh was driving him crazy. It was such a dirty laugh. I guess you like to tease a lot, Carrie said, growing bolder. Well, she adopted a little girl's voice. I don't always tease. Maybe you'll find that out. Oh, wow. Carrie didn't think he could stand much more of this. Do you go to Revere? He asked. Not yet. My family just moved here last week. I guess I'll start next week. Will you show me around? Will I? Sure. Hey, who told you to call me? Who set this up? You can guess that, too. Karen Ehlers? No. Was it Donna? Donna Mueller? No. I can't think of anyone else. Wasn't Margot, was it? Score one for you. But I haven't seen Margot since she moved. She goes to North now. Margot insisted that I call you. She said you were a great guy. Well, I am. She said you were modest, too. They both laughed. His laugh sounded more nervous than hers. He was thinking about Margot. They had been pretty good friends. They went out a couple times, but nothing much happened, and they realized they should just stay friends. Then Margot's family moved to the other side of town. She started going to North. He hadn't heard from her in months. It was really nice of her to fix him up with a blind date. Well, how about Saturday? He asked, then immediately felt foolish. I mean, do you want to go out? I thought you'd never ask. She laughed that sexy laugh again, but this time it was cut short. Oh, listen, someone wants to use the phone. I'll give you my name and address. You don't have to guess it after all. She quickly rattled off her name and address. He wasn't sure he heard her right. Was her name Amanda? He started to ask her to repeat it, but she hurriedly whispered, Pick me up at 8. Bye. And then before he could say anything, she added, "It's been nice spending time in the dark with you," and hung up. Carrie sat there with the receiver in his hand. "I think things are beginning to look up," he told himself with a pleased grin. Why did it sound as if she was calling from a payphone? That was weird. But of course, the whole thing was weird. What a voice. The way she said his name, that amazing laugh. He leapt out of his room and bounded down the steps 2 at a time. He had to tell someone about this call. Even Sean would appreciate it. "Sean, you won't believe this. What a fox." He stopped at the entrance to the living room. "Oh, hi, Dad." His father, still in uniform, nodded hello. He pushed the police cap back on his head, revealing more forehead. Before he lost most of his hair, Lieutenant Hart looked exactly like Sergeant Renko on Hill Street Blues. At least that's what the guys at the station house told him, and he eagerly believed it. Even though he wasn't from the South, he affected the slight southern drawl and the easy open-gated manner of the TV cop. Then he lost his hair, and his resemblance to the TV cop along with it. The guys at the station house still called him Renko, because they saw him with his cap on. At home, though, with his bald head revealed, he dropped the down-home manner and the southern speech. He seemed to his 2 sons gloomy and ill at ease. It was almost as if he only came to life when he had his police cap on. "Beer and potato chips for dinner? Can't you look after your brother better than that?" That was his greeting to Carrie. "I just got home," Carrie said, feeling his face redden. Why couldn't he ever talk to his dad without feeling embarrassed? "You were upstairs talking on the phone, weren't you?" "Yes. How come you're still in uniform?" "I'm going back out. I just wanted to check in on you boys. Everything okay, Sean?" "Uh-huh." Sean was watching an old Gilligan's Island. "Dad, I have to talk to you," Carrie began. "There's some McDonald's hamburgers in the freezer," Lieutenant Hart said, his eyes on the TV screen. "Remember, I bought extra so you guys would have them. Just put them in the microwave. 14 years old, and he's drinking beer for dinner? What next?" "Got some bad news today," Carrie went on. He was determined to tell his dad about the fiasco on the football field. He wanted to get it over with. Maybe with his father in such a hurry to get out, there wouldn't be the usual scene. "I could use a little bad news," Lieutenant Hart said bitterly. "Maybe I better sit down for this one." "Yeah," Carrie said. "Bring me a beer, if there's any left." Lieutenant Hart sat down on the folding chair by the front door. He groaned. His back was acting up again. Driving a patrol car 8 hours a day wasn't exactly helping it. Carrie brought him a can of beer from the refrigerator. He stood a few feet in front of his father and watched him pop open the top of the can. He was trying to decide how to start his story. Was there a way to tell it so his father wouldn't explode? No, he decided there wasn't. "I'm off the Panthers." That was a good way to start. Lieutenant Hart finished a long sip of beer. Then he put the can on his lap and slowly looked into Carrie's troubled face. "Tell me that one again?" He suddenly looked very old and very tired to Carrie. He wished he had some good news, some wonderful news, to tell him instead. News that would erase the wrinkles that ran down his cheeks and bring back that Renko smile. "Coach Stevens asked me to leave the team. There was an accident." "What kind of an accident?" He took another long sip of beer. "I fell on Sal Murdoch. It really was an accident. I broke his leg. Some people thought I did it on purpose, to get his position." "Why'd you do that?" "I told you, Dad, it was an accident." Why was he starting to whine? "It was an accident and Stevens kicked you off the team?" His father glared at him with the same suspicious eye he'd give a mugger or a grocery store thief. "He said I'd be a morale problem. Too many guys think I did it on purpose." "A morale problem? Does that idiot forget the contributions this family has made to his team? Why, Donald was the greatest player the Panthers ever produced. Donald put the school on the map with his running, and he saved Stevenson's job for him by getting that championship. Donald, Dad, we're not talking about Donald." Carrie was the one to scream first. His father seemed surprised by his anger. He took another long drink from the beer can to hide it. "Donald's younger brother belongs on the Panthers," he said finally, his expression a little more bitter than angry. He actually looked hurt. "Donald is gone, Dad. Coach Stevens doesn't care about Donald. All he cares about is that I broke his quarterback's leg, and could you two keep it down? I'm trying to watch TV." "Shut up, Sean," Carrie screamed, feeling himself lose control. "Don't talk to your brother like that. Donald never talked to you like that." Lieutenant Hart crushed the can in his hand and dropped it to the floor. "Stop talking about Donald." "Stop yelling at me, Carrie. What am I supposed to say? You tell me you got kicked off the team because of an accident, but I'm supposed to say don't worry about it?" He stood up and pulled down his cap. "You're supposed to talk to me. You're supposed to react to me. You're not supposed to talk about Donald, Carrie screamed. I've got to go, Lieutenant Hart said, sneering. Okay, you want to talk about Donald? Carrie's face was filled with desperation. He knew he should stop right there, not say another word, but he couldn't. Okay, fine. Tell me about Donald. Tell me what happened last year. Tell me why Donald is gone. Fill in the missing pieces, Dad. Fill in the piece that dropped out of my memory. Those days, those weeks. I've got a hole in my brain, Dad. A big hole. You want to talk about Donald? Come on, talk. Tell me what I can't remember. He grabbed his father by the shoulders. Tell me what my brain refuses to remember. Come on. Lieutenant Hart pulled out of Carrie's grasp. He made no attempt to comfort Carrie. Instead, he turned away. Facing the front door, he said quietly, Stop it, Carrie. Stop it now, fella. Carrie's hands coiled into fists. He felt ready to explode. Turn around, Dad. Turn around and look at me. His father shrugged his shoulders, the blue uniform wrinkling at the collar, and turned around slowly. Stop torturing yourself about last year, he said without emotion. Sometimes our brains know best. Sometimes our brains want to protect us. Don't try to remember what happened, Carrie. Just accept it. Carrie fought to keep the tears from covering his eyes, but he couldn't keep them back. I miss him, he blurted out. I miss Donald so much. Lieutenant Hart turned around quickly. I'll be back late, he said, his voice shaky. He opened the front door. Sorry, he said. I'm real sorry. And he stepped out into the night. Why do you always want to upset Dad like that? Sean asked from the couch. Carrie stood at the door, watching as the headlights to the patrol car came on, cutting through the thick wisps of fog. Headlights. Carrie closed his eyes and still saw headlights. The image was jarring his memory. Headlights. Something stirring in his brain. Most of the last year was missing from his memory, wiped out by some sort of tragedy. Headlights were a piece of the puzzle. He felt that. He knew it. But he couldn't go any further. The patrol car turned around. The headlights pointed down the hill. The two red taillights grew smaller as his father headed down to town. Carrie stared into the dark for a long time. Then he walked slowly back into the living room. Sean hadn't moved on the couch. Gilligan's Island had gone off, and now he was watching an old Leave It to Beaver. Gee, Dad, you're so smart, the beaver was saying to his well-dressed, smiling father. Tell Wally and me how we can be smart like you. Do you want a hamburger? Carrie asked. From Sean on the couch. Is that a yes or a no? At 1:30 in the morning, Carrie was seated at his desk, the gooseneck desk lamp throwing an arc of dim orange light onto his essay as he struggled to focus his eyes to finish it. What I didn't do on my summer vacation. Mr. Shannon, Carrie's English teacher, thought of himself as a real ace. He thought this assignment was the cleverest thing that had ever been foisted on a class of high school juniors. Poor Shannon, Carrie said aloud, his voice hoarse from weariness. He'll have to read 26 of these. I only have to read this one. English was Carrie's best subject. He liked reading. He could lose himself in any kind of book. He liked science fiction best, though. Somehow he felt more at home in other worlds. Carrie liked to write, too. Sometimes in past years, he would write long stories and send them to Donald when Donald was away at camp. Donald thought Carrie had real talent as a writer. The memory made Carrie smile. One more paragraph to write. He looked at the clock. 1:35. His father still wasn't home. He could hear Sean tossing about on his bed on the other side of the bedroom wall. Poor Sean. It was tough getting to sleep after lying on the couch for 8 hours straight. The phone rang, and he jumped. Who would call at this hour? Probably Josh, calling to see how he was doing. Josh was one of those people who never slept. He needed only 2 or 3 hours a night, that's all. Drove his parents nuts. Carrie picked up the phone after the first ring. Hello? His voice had cobwebs in it. Sticks and stones can break your bones. It was a strange female voice, a phony voice. It sounded as if she was pinching her nose and talking. What? Who is this? Carrie asked, his eyes blurring from the tiredness and the dim desk light. Sticks and stones and broken bones, the voice said. Who is this? The voice was raspy and distorted. He struggled to figure out who it was. Sharon, is that you? He remembered how Sharon looked in the car on the way to the hospital to see Sal. She looked wild with anger, out of control. Was she calling him now to annoy him and to threaten him? Sharon, if it's you, this isn't funny. The female voice at the other end laughed, a high-pitched, exaggerated laugh like a witch in a kid's TV show. Sharon, if we could just talk. The toe bone's connected to the foot bone. The foot bone's connected to the ankle bone. The ankle bone's connected to the leg bone. Click. She hung up. A chill went down Carrie's back. He dropped the receiver. It clunked and bounced on the countertop. He grabbed at it, missed, then grabbed it tightly. His heart was pounding. Just a stupid practical joke, he told himself. But it was scary, just the same. It was scary to be disliked. Carrie had never exactly been popular. Not popular the way Donald was, with friends and girlfriends always surrounding him, following him wherever he went, filling the house with laughter and warmth. But he had never been disliked either. And the fact that Sharon, who had always been kind to him, now hated him enough to... He decided to call her back and put an end to this. He searched through his drawer for the school phone directory, pulling papers out, tossing them on the floor. He found it on the very bottom. He was surprised to see that his fingers were trembling as he rifled through the pages, looking for Sharon's phone number. He found the number, blinked a couple times to clear his eyes, and dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Come on, Sharon, you know it's me calling you back. Pick it up. Come on. Hello? A man's voice. Her father. I was calling Sharon because... Who is this? He asked angrily. Never mind. I don't care who this is. I don't want to know which idiot friend of my daughter's would call at this hour. Just don't ever do it again. He slammed the receiver down, producing a loud explosion in Carrie's right ear. Carrie nearly dropped the phone again, but replaced it with a trembling hand. 1 paragraph to go. He had to get this stupid essay finished. He couldn't let them get to him. He wouldn't. Chapter 3. Okay, here are the keys. His father handed the keys to him reluctantly. Remember, give it plenty of gas when you're starting it, but don't flood it. The damn thing has been real hard to start lately. Carrie took the keys and flipped them into his shirt pocket. I'll be careful about it, he said. New shirt? Yeah. Carrie couldn't believe that his father would notice. It's sort of a rugby shirt. I got it at that shop at the mall. Well, his father looked him up and down, probably with the same expression he had when examining a suspect in a lineup. Fancy new shirt, clean clothes, brush your hair back to look like that movie star you think you look like. I'd say you have a heavy date tonight. Carrie blushed. He wasn't used to so much attention from his dad. It's a blind date, actually, he said uncomfortably. The new shirt itched. His stomach felt a little feathery. She'd have to be blind to go out with you. Sean broke in. Then he threw himself down on the couch, laughing like a lunatic. He thought it was the funniest thing anyone had ever said. Is that the kind of jokes 14-year-olds make these days? Lieutenant Hart asked, removing his cap to scratch the top of his head, unable to contain the smile that spread across his face. Shut up, Sean, Carrie called to his brother, who was still laughing like a hyena, slapping his knees and rolling around on the carpet. Good night, Dad. He walked out to the car, an '82 blue Mustang, and lowered himself behind the wheel. He pulled the keys out of his shirt pocket and stuck the right one into the ignition. Then he took a deep breath. He knew his dad would be listening. If the car didn't start right away, he'd come tearing out of the house, and Carrie would have to sit through another lecture on how to start the car without flooding it. He pressed down on the gas pedal once, twice. He turned the key. Come on, car. Come on, start up. Let me get away from here. The car started right up. He could see his father standing in the doorway, a disappointed look on his face. Carefully, Carrie backed down the short drive, turned into Hillside Drive, and headed toward town. It was a clear, crisp autumn night. The air was cold and clean. There'd probably be a frost later on. A good night for snuggling up with someone, he thought. Then he said her name aloud. Amanda. It was all wrong. It was too straight-laced, too old-fashioned, too pioneer days on the old frontier. Amanda. He had only talked to her once, but he knew she wasn't an Amanda. She was a Nadia. Maybe he would call her that. She'd probably think it was funny. At the bottom of the hill, Hillside Drive divided into 2 roads, one leading toward Newtown, where Paul Revere High was located, the other leading to the old section of the city, the original village. Amanda lived on Sycamore Street in the old village. Carrie remembered it as being one of the nicest streets in town, a broad street lined with stately old sycamore trees and even statelier old mansions. Maybe she's rich as well as sexy, he told himself. He tried to picture for the 10,000th time what she looked like. He had already decided on straight black hair flowing down behind her waist, sort of a Crystal Gale effect, but sexier. And he had decided on deep green eyes, and a small heart-shaped mouth with dark, dark lipstick. And of course, she was built like crazy. But would she be wearing a sweater to emphasize her fabulous body? Or would she come on more casual and demure in a blouse buttoned up to her chin and some sort of preppy long skirt? He couldn't decide. And of course, she probably wouldn't want to go all the way with him until after the movie, but he could understand that. He liked a girl with some of the old-fashioned values. He and Josh had spent several hours discussing this blind date, the phone call, and every word she had said. They were in Josh's den, lying on the soft leather couches, gazing up at the ceiling. A Springsteen album was booming from the speakers recessed on either side of the bar. Josh made him repeat every part of the phone conversation at least 6 times. Then he would say, "Man, she's hot. She is hot." Then he'd ask him to repeat a different part of the conversation. Since the entire talk had lasted about 3 minutes, there wasn't a whole lot to repeat, and Carrie found the conversation getting a little boring after about the 8th go-around. If only Josh could think of something else to say besides, "Man, she's hot." The fact that she was so hot was beginning to make Carrie a bit nervous. He had to admit, he wasn't exactly Burt Reynolds. Suave and sophisticated weren't exactly the words that came to mind when people described him, even if he did look exactly like Ralph Macchio. True, he wasn't a complete nerd either. Like everything in his life, like everything about him, Carrie was sorta in between, not really one thing or the other. "I got another call last night too," Carrie said. He decided to tell Josh about the threatening, frightening call, mainly to change the subject. He described the voice, the sing-song way of talking that held such menace, and the repeated rhymes about bones. "Oh, right," Josh said casually, getting up from the couch to change the compact disc on the stereo. "That was me." "Sure it was," Carrie said sarcastically. "No, really," Josh insisted. "Did I scare you?" "I did, didn't I?" "Come off it, Josh. I'm going to audition for a part in one of those slasher movies. I figure if I can scare you, I'm ready to try out. I really want that part. You get to slash 20 co-eds to pieces. It's cool." Carrie found himself getting really annoyed. "Josh, someone is trying to frighten me, and all you can do is make jokes." "So I did scare you," Josh said, bulging his eyes and twisting his face to look like a mad fiend. "All right, you want to come with me and help me buy a big butcher knife?" "Forget it," Carrie said disgustingly. "Hey, how's Sal doing? Have you heard?" "You don't want to know," Josh said, turning serious at last. "I heard he was still unconscious. His leg is a simple fracture, but the doctors are worried that he still isn't conscious." "I feel terrible," Carrie said, and he really did. Now it was Saturday night, nearly 8 o'clock, and he was feeling nervous and itchy. Turning onto Sycamore Street, perhaps the fanciest street in town, the old Mustang seemed nervous too. It choked and backfired and nearly stalled out. Cursing, he pressed the gas pedal down, and the engine smoothed out. He slowed the car down to read the house numbers. Streetlights on tall poles cast wide beams of white light through the trees onto the wide lawns, but it was still hard to find the address signs among the tall hedges and manicured shrubs. This neighborhood should look familiar, he thought. He had school friends who lived on Sycamore. He had visited in some of the immense old houses with their tennis courts, their pools, their room after room of antique furniture you weren't allowed to sit on or play near. But in the dark silence of a cool autumn night, it all looked different. The old houses, carefully shrouded behind tall evergreens and walls of hedges, took on an aura of mystery. Leaves fluttered in the pale light of the street lamps, casting moving shadows that made the smooth lawn seem to churn and bubble as if alive. "It's definitely spooky," Carrie told himself. "At least up in the hills, the houses are close together, and you can always see some sign of life. People in their living rooms, watching TV, lights. Here, only the shadows moved." But why was he thinking such weird thoughts? There was the house on the next corner. He was about to pick up Amanda. It's funny the things you think about when you're nervous, he told himself. His throat felt suddenly dry. His new shirt still itched all down his back and around his neck. He checked the number on the small wooden address sign again. His foot hit the brake harder than he had intended when he saw the house. It was a mess. Even in the light from the street lamps, Carrie could see that the hedges were wild and poked out in all directions. The grass hadn't been mowed in months. Tall weeds stretched up everywhere, and tree limbs cluttered the ground. A rotting wheelbarrow lay on its side near the driveway, which was cracked and rutted with patches of weeds growing up through the ruts. I guess the previous owners didn't leave it in very good condition for Amanda and her family, Carrie told himself. He looked up to the house, which was in no better shape than the grounds. 2 white columns stood on either side of the front doorway. But even from the street, Carrie could see that the columns were chipped and cracking, with the paint peeling off. To the left of the columns, A screened-in porch had already been boarded up, even though the weather was still mild. Two of the windows on the ground floor appeared to be broken. Large strips of paper or tape had been used to cover the holes. Carey parked on the street. As he turned the key and pulled it from the ignition, he realized that his hands were cold and wet. He looked back up to the house. It was completely dark. They must be in back, he told himself. But wouldn't they leave a light on at the front entrance if they knew he was coming? Maybe they were having trouble with the electricity. Leaves crackled under his shoes as he walked up the driveway. A weed wrapped itself around his left leg, and he had to stop to disentangle himself. There was no car on the driveway. The wide garage door to the right of the house was half open. It was too dark to see inside the garage. He walked quickly up the driveway and onto the stone path that led to the front entrance. Like everything else he saw, the path was cracked and crumbling. Vine-like weeds flourished in the cracks. He was out of breath when he reached the front stoop. He stood there for a moment, remembering Amanda's voice on the phone, catching his breath, looking back to the street at his car, waiting beyond the ever-grown, junk-strewn lawn. What does she look like? If she only looks half as good as her voice, wow. A dog barked across the street. Carey jumped. He had become accustomed to the silence, to the sound of the rustling wind and the dry, scrabbling dance of leaves in their shadows. He pressed the doorbell. He couldn't hear it ring inside the house. The dog barked again. "Mind your own business," he called to it. He pressed the bell again. There were no sounds from inside the house. No sounds, no lights. He was standing in front of a large empty wreck. Had someone played a joke on him? He walked to the edge of the front stoop and leaned forward as far as he could, trying to see in the window. Drapes were drawn. He caught himself regaining his balance just before toppling over the side of the stoop. Maybe he should go around to the back. He pressed the doorbell again and kept his finger on it for at least half a minute. This was silly. What a waste of time. There was no one in this house. No one lived here. From the looks of things, no one had lived here for more than a year. Carey kicked the door in disgust. "The best phone call of my life," he said angrily, "and it's all a joke." Carey turned and began to walk down the steps, and the front door slowly began to open. Two faces peered out at him. Carey hurried back onto the stoop, tripping over a step. One dim bulb in the hallway behind the couple at the door provided the only light. It was a man and a woman. They weren't old, but they held themselves like old people. The woman had solid gray hair tied back severely from her forehead into a small, tight bun. She wore a knitted shawl around her shoulders. She was carrying a teacup and saucer in one hand. The man had a bald, speckled head. He was stooped over so that his head appeared to emerge from his chest. He wore square, frameless glasses. He was dressed in a blue bathrobe, which covered striped pajamas. Carey was so startled to see someone appear at the doorway that he just stared at them for several seconds. They didn't speak either. They stared back at him. Their expressions revealed fear and surprise. Finally, Carey regained his senses. "Hi, is Amanda home?" he asked. The man's eyes bulged behind the square sunglasses. "What?" "Is Amanda home? I'm her date." The woman screamed and dropped her teacup. It shattered on the floor just inside the door. "No, no, no," she screamed, her eyes rolling up to the ceiling. The man didn't scream, but he seemed about to faint. He closed his eyes. His voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "Amanda's dead," he told Carey. Chapter 4. Carey wasn't sure he had heard right. "Please?" he said. "Amanda is dead." The man was turning angry. "What do you want with us? What sort of prank is this?" Carey couldn't speak. What sort of prank was it? Suddenly the woman stopped screaming. She stared at Carey and grabbed her husband with both hands. "It's him," she cried. "Look, it's him." They both seemed to recognize Carey. "What are you doing back here?" the man bellowed, struggling to free himself from his wife's grip. "Why do you come to torture us?" "No, no, no," the woman began screaming again. Carey turned and leapt off the stoop. He ran across the front lawn, stumbling over tree limbs, pulling himself through thick clumps of overgrown weeds. He looked back over his shoulder. The man had come out onto the stoop. Was he coming after Carey? Carey reached into his trouser pocket as he ran and pulled out the car key. He had to get to the car. He had to get away from there. Gasping for breath, he reached the car and pulled open the door. He looked up to the house. The man had disappeared back inside. Was he calling the police? Had he gone to get a gun or something? Carey jammed the key into the ignition. It wouldn't fit. Wrong key. He dropped the keys on the floor of the car, fumbled around for them, and retrieved them. This time, he carefully found the correct key before pushing it into the ignition. He pumped the gas pedal once, twice. He turned the key. "Let's go," he said aloud, looking up to the house. There was no one on the stoop or in the doorway. The car sputtered and stalled. Come on. He turned the key again. Again, the ignition tried but failed. He pushed the gas pedal, then remembered he wasn't supposed to. He turned the key. Nothing. He had flooded it. Nothing to do but wait a few moments. But did he have a few moments? He listened for the police siren. He looked back up to the house. Nothing happening. The house. There was a huge rec room in the basement. It had a ping-pong table, a billiards table, and a jukebox. Knotty pine paneling on one wall. Wallpaper with red and yellow balloons on another wall. How did he know that? Had he really been here before? Did these horrified, sick-looking people really know him? Who used to play in that rec room? Why could he remember the wallpaper, but not any faces, any people? Carrie felt a sudden surge of dizziness. It lasted only a second, just long enough to make him feel even worse, even more frightened. That hole in his memory, it was so wide. Was this house one of those missing pieces? Who was Amanda? Why was she dead? Why didn't he remember her? Did he ever know her? And the girl on the phone 2 nights before, had she sent him there as part of a cruel joke? Was she Amanda too? Or had this leaky memory played a horrible trick on him? He turned the key in the ignition and prayed. The car started right up. He put it into drive and floored the gas pedal. The tires squealed in protest as the car carried him away from the old house, past the silent sycamores bordering the street, past the hedges and the secrets that hid behind them. He drove aimlessly around town, then up into the hills, past his house, up to Johnson's Point, which overlooked the entire valley and all the towns beyond it. He stopped the car about a foot from the cliff edge and turned off the ignition. There was no one around. It started to rain, a few taps on the windshield at first, and then a steady shower. He turned off the headlights, scooted down in the seat, and stared at the water washing down the glass. A few minutes later, the rain stopped. He stared at the tiny droplets of water. Thousands of them had covered the windshield. Inside, each droplet was a little reflection of moonlight. 1,000 little moons. It was a beautiful illusion. Was this blind date an illusion too? Had that girl with the sexy voice sent him back to an unwelcome place in his forgotten past? Another thought entered his mind, chilling him with its cruelty. Could the girl on the phone have been a friend of Sharon's? Was she helping Sharon to get back at him for breaking Sal's leg? No, he decided. No, he told himself, and repeated it. No. He stared through the 1,000 tiny drops of light, and it all came very clear to him. He had played the trick on himself. He had guided himself to that old house, a house that played some kind of role in his misplaced past. He had taken himself up that familiar path to that familiar front door. The girl on the phone must have given him a different address. It may not have even been on Sycamore Street. He realized suddenly that he hadn't written down the address she had given him so hurriedly over the phone. Why hadn't he written it down? Well, for one thing, he was sitting in a dark room. But he had felt no need to write down the address. His mind was determined to take him to the house where Amanda had lived. Amanda. Was that the name of the girl who called him? He was no longer sure. Perhaps it was a name his memory had wanted him to hear. Carrie stared at the tiny water droplets. Suddenly they looked like car headlights to him. 1,000 car headlights all coming toward him. He felt a stab of fear, a tug of memory. Then the lights all blurred together. Carrie closed his eyes. He tried to hear her voice on the phone again. Tried to recreate what she had said. Amanda. Maybe she said another name, and he heard Amanda. Maybe she said another address, and he heard the address on Sycamore. Those pale, sick people who opened the door to that dark house, they knew him, and they were terrified to see him again. He pulled himself up in the seat. Enough. This is too heavy, man. And wait a minute. What about the blind date? What about Amanda, or whatever her real name was? She had to be home, wondering where the hell he was. He had stood her up. "It's been nice spending time in the dark with you," she said in that sexy, teasing voice. And he had stood her up. What a dork. He started up the car and threw it into reverse. The tires slid in the mud from the rain, but he got it in control and got back onto the narrow road that wound down the hill. Maybe she had called, wondering where he was. If not, How would he find her? He didn't have her number. He didn't have her address. He wasn't even sure he had her right name. It wasn't going to be easy. Oh, wait a minute. Of course, it would be easy. He'd call Margot. Margot set up the blind date. He'd get all the info from Margot, of course. Then all he'd have to do was call and explain why he stood her up. And that wouldn't be so easy. But he could do it. He had to. For one thing, Josh would never let him live it down if he didn't. He pulled the car into the drive and ran into the house. All of the lights were on, but no one seemed to be around. Sean? Hey, Sean. The TV wasn't on. That meant Sean wasn't home. There were no phone messages for him on the pad by the phone. So, maybe she called, and maybe she didn't. He'd have to call Margot. Did he have her new number? No, he'd have to call information. The Fremont family. Somewhere on the north side. No. I don't know the address. No. Yes, that's it. He started to push Margot's number, but then hesitated. It wasn't going to be so easy explaining to Margot what had happened. Margot, thanks for fixing me up with the blind date. Could you tell me her address and her phone number? And what's her name? I didn't catch it the first time I spoke to her. You see, I was supposed to pick her up at 8 tonight, but I went somewhere else instead. Well, if he was really going to spend time in the dark with this girl, he'd just have to let Margot know what a jerk he was. He finished pushing her number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. He hung up after the 8th ring. There was no one home. As soon as he put down the receiver, the phone rang. He cleared his throat, then lifted the receiver to his ear. Hello? The ankle bone's connected to the foot bone. The foot bone's connected to the leg bone. The leg bone. The leg bone. The leg bone. The shrill nasal voice kept repeating the phrase over and over, growing louder each time, louder and angrier, until Carrie hung up. Alright, well I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I almost have everything recorded already for the second video. It's just going to take me some time to go back and edit all of the audio tracks, but as soon as I get the next parts complete, I will upload them. And with the next videos, I won't have any kind of introduction or anything. I'm not going to waste much time. With the next video, it's just going to jump right into the story. But thank you guys for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for everyone who has subscribed to my channel. Thank you to everyone who comments. And I will see you guys next time.